Hi, everyone. Welcome back to TEXTing IRL, Ideas for Real Life, where we wrestle with the big dilemmas of our time through the lens of classical and modern Torah texts. I'm your host, Elana Stein Hain. We're recording on November 24th, 2025. Israeli and North American Jews are facing hardships, and for some of us, that challenges our faith, or at least has us wonder, where is God in all of this? This week, we turn to the biblical character Joseph to discuss this issue. What's remarkable about his character is not simply the twist of fate that he experiences, but his consistent assertion of God being there with him through his adversity. He's a person of deep faith, even down to the Egyptian catacombs. Even when we would have expected him to try to impress Pharaoh by saying he did it all alone. And even when his brothers finally admit that they've done wrong. Throughout it all, he looks at God as being by his side and his guide. He's a model of faith even within his adversity, even before he knows the outcome of his story. So many of us are watching the Jewish story right now, in Israel, in North America, in Europe, with broken hearts. We truly don't know what the future will bring, and so much feels wrong. I'm wondering, what is the role of faith? Yes, faith in God, not in ourselves, in a time like this. And I know many Jews actively avoid God talk. But I think that Joseph gives us an opportunity to talk about faith in a layered way. Is faith a type of escapism? Is faith an opportunity to look at life in a different way? Is faith something that's supposed to keep us tethered to our values, even when things feel incredibly unstable? Or is there something else? To discuss this, I invited Rabbi Dani Segal, who I feel always has a unique insight to share ever since I met him over a decade ago. He is the head of the Beit Midrash at Mabua, which is a Beit Midrash, a learning center for young Israelis following their army service. And he used to be the head of the Rabbanut Israelit Beit Midrash at the Shalom Hartman Institute. Dani, thank you so much for joining, and this is a good opportunity to thank our sponsors as well, Micah Philanthropies and Walder Charitable Trust. So, Dani, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Shalom, and thank you for inviting me.
What I'm hoping we'll be able to do together is to look at 3 moments where Joseph brings up God, and try to extrapolate from there what exactly is the role of faith, of emunah, as it's playing out in the way the narrative tells it.
That's fair.
Sound good?
Yep.
So the first moment that I want to look at is actually where he's challenged by the wife of Potiphar, who's trying to seduce him. And he says something that I think we wouldn't have necessarily expected, right? He says, "Enenu gadol b'bayit hazeh mimeni." There's nobody greater in this house than me, meaning your husband has given me a wonderful job here. I'm in charge of everything. V'lo chasach mimeni me'umah. He didn't take anything from me, meaning I'm in charge of it all. Ki imotach, except you, he says, except his wife. Basher atishto, because you're married to him. How could I do this thing to him and be with you? How could I do that? And then he adds 2 words that I wouldn't have expected. V'chatati le'elohim. I would be sinning to God by doing this. So first of all, do you expect those 2 words at the end?
There's something very special about Yosef from the first minute. When the Torah introduces him, they say, V'hu na'ar. He's a boy. There's something always very alive about Yosef, and he's a dreamer, and he's a believer. And this moment with Eshes Potiphar is very interesting. He uses the words V'chatati le'elohim. And when you were using the words Enenu gadol b'bayit hazeh mimeni, I was thinking, who's he speaking about? The Kadosh Baruch Hu?
Right.
Potiphar.
Who's not greater? Who's not greater? Is it Potiphar's not greater? God's not greater than me? I have everything.
Yeah,
I have
gave
everything.
me everything. So how can I still do this? But Dafka, I want to focus on the beautiful interpretation that Chazal give that.
The rabbis.
Yeah, because when they say V'chatati le'elohim, the Torah says V'chatati le'elohim, so you're saying that at this moment, Yosef's belief, his emunah, is what's keeping his moral clarity in times of distress. But the rabbis give a different interpretation. They say, Nitgalta lo dmut diukano shel aviv. In English, he saw the picture of his father. I'm going back to Yosef the Na'ar, the young boy. He hasn't seen his Abba since he's 17. And what kept him from sinning is maybe God, but God through the lens of his Abba. And it's a beautiful way of looking at things. I'm thinking of belief now in our times. I think of so many Israelis that they have the great ideal. If you ask why people went to Miluim, of course, Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, but they went for their friends. They went for Mizrahi and for Solomon. They knew they would be there, and they had to be there for them. So Yosef sees God, but he sees him through his father. I think Israelis today see the great ideals, Am Yisrael, Torah Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, but it's through the people.
Well, this is so interesting. I love that you're saying that, because I think even from an American perspective, the idea of resilience, I think maintaining your moral compass in a time where you feel that you're being dehumanized, it is a type of resilience. It's a type of, no, we can still do the right thing. And I think for a lot of people, that sense of we can still do the right thing and be our best selves, even in this time, it's not about some abstract sense of faith of God is my super ego and is making sure I don't do wrong. It's about some sense of I'm actually following the footsteps of my ancestors, because my ancestors had a sense of a belief in something bigger and a belief of something that still gave them a sense of responsibility to be good, even when people were telling them they're bad, even when people were telling them they're nothing, even, right? That there's something to that sense of, well, I can connect to that through my ancestors, right? You're doing it also horizontally. You're saying people are willing to go for that ideological, that moral compulsion to get in there because of even their horizontal relationships. But there is something powerful about being able to look back at the resilience and the faith and the goodness of your ancestors, right? And that itself is a form of covenant, and even a theological sense of covenant.
And there's definitely a covenant also with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, with God, also with our ancestors, and also with people around us. I have a story. I lost a close friend in this war, Yossi Ershkovitz.
Very good educator.
Very
I read
good
about
educator
him.
and a principal. And
Yeah.
And one of the soldiers that came to the Shiva said, Yossi used to make a lot of fun. He was also a wonderful educator, and he was also a great and funny guy.
Listen, if you're going to be in education, you need a sense of
You
humor.
need a sense
I just
of
want to
humor.
be clear about that.
So this soldier said that one of his hobbies was to raise arguments in the pluga, in the platoon, and then walk away and let people fight about them. So Yossi said, or the soldier said, that when they entered Gaza, many soldiers signed on a tzitzit, even non-religious soldiers. And Yossi automatically, as a religious person, made fun of this non-religious person. And he said, "Oh, now you're קצת קשה as דתיים."
Right, things are hard, so now you become religious, okay?
So he looked at him and he said, "No, it's not that. And don't worry, the day we come out, I'm going to take this off. But when we're going in, I feel that many, many generations are entering with us. And we're hearing the name of many former generations. And for some of them, this piece of clothing was important. So I'm putting it on, but I'm putting it on for them." So I think for many people, belief also in the great ideals of Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael, but also in God, in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, it's through their ancestors, through their tradition, and through the people around them.
Yeah, no, you see that in America also. People taking on things that their grandparents used to do, wearing different signs of Jewishness that belonged to a family, meaning there's something to it. And by the way, I happen to have seen that the Or HaChaim, he was an 18th century Moroccan Kabbalist, essentially. I'm also a Talmudist, but a Kabbalist. And he actually, I love the way that he puts this. He says, Yosef, it's not that he doesn't want to lose everything he's achieved. Yes, he doesn't want to lose that by messing with the wife of Potiphar. But it's worse than that. Ani machsir atzmi mimakor hanishamot. I would be alienating myself or getting rid of the source of all souls, meaning I don't want to lose that. You might take other things away from me. I don't want to lose that. I'm going to hold on to that. And even if other things get taken away from me, I'm not going to lose that. So I think there are a lot of people who are grasping for other things, feel like they may be taken away, but there's something that we're holding on to. So it's a morality, it's an ethic, it's a behavior, it's a covenant, but there's something. I think that's a start, right? We're going to be nidbach al nidbach, right? Okay. We're going to go brick by brick here. I want to look at a second, okay? I want to look at a second. A second, I think, is where, and there are lots of places where Yosef mentions God, so we could be here all day, right? But a second place is when he's actually in jail, right? He was put in jail because Eshet Potiphar, the wife of Potiphar, set him up, right? Because he wouldn't sleep with her. She set him up. It's not like things went hunky-dory because he had faith. That's not, right? That's not an assumption of his story at all, right? He's now in the catacombs in Egypt. And this butler and baker of Pharaoh have had dreams. And listen to what they say. Vayemru elav, they say to him, Shalom chalamnu, we had a dream. Ufoter enoto, but there's nobody to interpret that dream. Vayomer alehem Yosef, and Yosef says to them, no. Halol Elohim pitronim. God has the explanations of dreams. Saprunali, tell them to me. Meaning they say we don't have anybody to interpret. He says, yes, you do right here. And I absolutely love, I happen to have been blessed to go to Bologna, Italy last week. Unbelievable experience. And in Bologna, I found out, I didn't know that Sforno, the great commentator on the Bible, he was on the Torah, he lived in Bologna. I couldn't believe it. I was in the Jewish Museum, and I was like, oh my gosh, Sforno. And a man of all trades, might I say. But he says something magnificent here. He says, Yosef actually was turning to them and saying, you think there's nobody to interpret your dream, but let me tell you something. As long as there's someone with Tselem Elokim, as long as there's somebody with a divine spark in them, we can get to some interpretation. We can get to some divine connectivity to understand your dream. Now, I don't understand what it means to interpret dreams, but what I do understand is that he's turning to them, Sforno thinks, and saying, you think there's no one with Tselem Elokim here. You think there's nobody with a divine spark here. You look around and all you see are prisoners. And I'm turning to you and saying, no. I have Tselem Elokim. I have a divine spark. And to me, this is emunah, this is faith playing a different kind of role, which is, I'm still something. I'm still something. God believes in me. I'm still something, even if others are telling me that I'm not. And that, I think, is so powerful.
It's a beautiful way of looking at Yosef. I'll say Yosef said he mentions God a lot. I think there's something that evolves in the way that he mentions God. In his first dreams, he's the dreamer, he's the interpreter. With Sarah Mashkim and Seraphim, the butler and the baker. So it's a mix. Halol Elohim pitronim sapuna li. And you interpret that beautifully as saying, God has the solution, talk to me. And you're saying, Yosef realizes that God is with him in this moment. Later on with Pharaoh, it will be biladai. I'm not in the picture at all. Elohim yaneh shlom po. So God
is going to give you the interpretation in that.
And he becomes more and more present. But I want to say about what you said now, about the presence of God in our lowest moments. We're talking about morality earlier. I think people felt much more moral in these difficult situations. And I think people were much stronger believers in times that they should have lost all their belief in God. You're saying, Yosef says, even here God is with me. I think of Eli Sharabi or of Bar Cooperstein. People that said, not only is God here with me, dafka here, God is with me. There's a beautiful poem of Amir Gilboa. It starts with the words, Gdolim Maaseh Elohai, how great are the deeds of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, of God. Then he says, Hu baimi bechol moraot habechi. He's always with me. And he'll be with me at my lowest moments. And in many ways, I feel that people felt presence when nobody else was present. So Yosef is one degree, saying God is here is even here with me. And I think many people felt only God is here with me. And even at these low moments.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's very funny to consider whether faith is something that is an escape from reality, or whether denying faith is something that's an escape from reality. Meaning, because when you say it as, imagine a hamburger, trying to the degree that she can to do something that she thinks connects her to God. In terms of her, I think it was kashrut. She said she kept kashrut.
Yeah, she fasted on Tanit Esther.
She fasted on Tanit Esther, which,
Yeah.
if I told you how many people who tell you they fast on Tanit Esther, not fasting on Tanit Esther, it's a different conversation. But I think the point is, the question of what happens when there are a lot of people around and you feel very confident and you feel very strong and you feel very justified and validated. So the question is, where does faith go in that, right? In those moments, you either kind of ignore faith because it's not necessary, so to speak, or it's like prosperity gospel. Like, look, God's chosen me because look how well I'm doing. It's obvious, right?
Yeah.
But what happens when all that stuff goes away? Where you're literally, and these people were literally by themselves, right? All that stuff goes away and you don't even have, and you dread having any other person being there. Because if any other person is there, it means you're threatened, you're in danger. And it's in those moments where it's sort of like, oh, wow, clarity. But what happens then when you go back into the world? It's the question of what's real. And I think this is why people don't like to talk about God. I'm serious, right? The question of what's real, what feels real.
Ken, I'll say two things. One, I'm quoting your words from before, of Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim is saying, you took everything away, you're not going to take this away. It's a clinging to something. This is what I have at this moment. And we'll see how it plays out in life. But it's very interesting that to see these people, it wasn't escapism. Wasn't, okay, we'll cling to God now because there's nobody else. They're bringing it back into their life. And it doesn't matter if it's in the form of keeping kashrut or fasting on.
It's going to take different forms.
And it plays a role in their lives. There was a beautiful post on Facebook of one of these soldiers after a hamburger, and he was in the middle of army duty, and he says, okay, it's Tanit Esther, we're doing something important, I don't need to fast. And then as I was going to drink my coffee, I said, oh, a hamburger. And he writes this whole thing of it, couldn't you eat or drink something like...
I could have
what did you do what did you do to us so many generations now that you set this?
Right. And just to make sure for those listening, Tanit Esther is a customary fast that precedes Purim. Right? It precedes Purim.
Not everybody is very strict about Tanit Esther.
It's supposed to mimic where Esther says, I want you all to fast for me for 3 days before I go into Achashverosh, and I try to do what I can do. But I do think that there's something behind this whole question of what feels more real. What's more, the stuff you can touch, the stuff you can feel, or the stuff that you can't really ever prove. But there's something, it reminds me of Descartes sort of saying, I think, therefore I am. There's something about being alone where you're sort of like, I feel that there's some sort of presence, so there's some sort of presence. It's very intense. It's just very, very intense. I want to mention, and hopefully we'll get to put it in the show notes. I have to find it. My friend David Zvi Kalman introduced me to an incredible letter from a Holocaust survivor who lost everything and basically wrote a letter to God and said, I'm not letting you go. As much as you try to run away from me, or you try to kick me away from you, I'm not letting you go because I'm not also going to lose this, right? Which is absolutely fascinating. So I think we already have some bricks here, we have some layers here that already give us a little bit of like thought about what faith is doing here, right? So for Yosef, faith is actually keeping him true to his principles. It's keeping him true to his family legacy. It's keeping him in relationship with where he comes from, even when he's out there in the middle of nowhere. For him, it's actually something that reminds him that he has dignity, that he has a divine spark, and God is with him even there, and that doesn't always look like things going great. So I actually want to look at a third layer, and it's not this week's Torah portion, but it is a huge statement by Yosef that is actually kind of a shocking statement. It's after their father dies, and essentially the brothers are scared. I mean, their father's not around anymore to protect them. What is Yosef going to do to them now, right? And basically, Yosef turns to them and says, like, well, I don't know what you're worried about. You don't even understand what happened here. You were doing something, and you were doing something wrong, but God had a completely different picture that was very unpleasant for me, but still had a completely different picture, and it goes like this. Ba'atem chashavtem alai ra'ah. You intended to do me harm, but Elohim chashava l'tovah. God intended it for good. Now, did God want them to do that? No, he's not implying that. Yeah. He's just saying God calculated it for good. Why? Leman aso kayom hazeh, lachayot amrav. So that I'd be able to essentially sustain a whole people. Now, I don't know if he's talking about the Egyptians or his family, but this was in order for me to sustain people during famine, right? Again, I don't think he's saying this is what you should have done in any regard.
Yeah.
He's just saying the picture, you see this much of the picture, and now I see a different part of the picture, and the whole picture looks different as a result.
It's amazing because you said it's not this week's Parsha. It's this week's Parsha. It's next week's Parsha. It's last week's Parsha.
Okay.
It's the whole second half of the book of Bereshit. From 2 weeks ago, we're living in a few different stories.
Okay.
And every one of the characters...
You're saying from the beginning of Joseph's story.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's Jacob's story. There's Joseph's story. There's the brothers' story. There's Pharaoh's story later on. They're all seeing a certain part of this story. The only ones playing God in this scenario are us, the readers.
We see it all.
And so I don't know about what Yosef is trying to say about belief, but it's a big lesson in belief for anybody reading the second half of Bereshit, because we get, in Hebrew we say Kriyat Torah, which is always translated as Torah reading.
Sure.
But Kriyat Torah should be Torah calling. Kriyat Torah. What's the Torah calling out and saying to us? And I think the experience...
By the way, just things like that, that's why I invited you on this show. Meaning that, right there. Just that. I just want everyone to appreciate that. Yes, what is the Torah calling to us? Yes.
So the Torah in the whole second half of Bereshit is giving us a big lesson. We're Joseph. We're Jacob. We're the brothers. In our real lives, we realize that we're seeing part of the picture. And allowing us to play God for these whole 6 weeks of reading through the second half of Bereshit is a big, big lesson in belief. So that's what Joseph is saying. Joseph is saying at some point, Atem chashavtem alai ra'ah, Elohim chashava l'tovah. You thought one thing, and God thought another. But that's one sentence. The whole half of the book is saying, this is what you see, and this is the bigger picture. And I think the bigger picture is playing a very major and important role for many people today in the way they deal with belief.
Well, I think one of the things that's very scary for people is that we see our piece of the puzzle, and that's all we see. And I think for Yosef, what's fascinating is he can say that once he's become the viceroy and once he's helping everyone. But the idea that even before the fact, and that's what I think is so powerful about him in the catacombs, that even before the fact saying, I don't know how this story is going to end, but even if the story ends poorly for me, I still think God is with me. And then I think what he's saying to the brothers is, even though this story was very bad, and eventually it did something good for somebody, I see all of those pieces together. And I think that's the time when faith is not escapism, is if you don't need faith to save you from the situation that you're in. But actually, to me, faith is seeing a longer arc of covenant between God and the Jewish people and God and the world, which means it's actually not only about me. I have to do what I can, but I actually, it's a longer view that isn't necessarily going to keep me from having difficult times.
And קודם כל, I'll take that term, longer arc of covenant. Maxim, it's beautiful.
Thanks.
And I'm going to go to Shir HaMa'alot that we sing before Birkat HaMazon, the psalms that we do before our grace after meal.
Yeah.
Which starts with, it was almost Israel's national anthem, by the way.
Wow.
Shir HaMa'alot B'shuv Adonai et Shivat
Do you
Zion.
think people argue about the anthem now?
Yeah.
Imagine, yeah.
So Ayinu Kecholmim, one day when we return to Zion, it will be like a dream. The last verse of that psalm says, Bo yavo berina noseh alumotav. We call a person to come in happiness with his sheaves. Now, when we remember the person who dreamt about sheaves, we're saying to Joseph, we're saying, thank you for being a dreamer and a believer. And it's a long, long arc of covenant. And one day, when all our big dreams come true, we're going to invite you with all your dreams to be part of the celebration. That's Bo yavo berina noseh alumotav.
Let's put it this way. Let's hope that there's a good end to our story.
Amen.
And that our story, God willing, doesn't really have an end.
Amen.
And that we're all in it for that longer arc and we can be part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you next time, and thanks for watching.